welcome to NAMI Maine Talks. My name is Mary Gagnon. I am the Senior Director of Prevention and Workplace Wellbeing. And I'd like to turn it over to Ian here.
Hi, Mary. Hi, everyone. My name is Ian Gould. I am a suicide prevention trainer here with NAMI Maine.
Awesome. And we are joined by Angela Whitten, who is the Executive Director and co-founder of Stay for Life, which is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to save lives by advocating for men's mental health and suicide prevention. Today, we're going to be talking about men's mental health. And we're going to be speaking about suicide in this podcast, so just please take care of yourselves. So, everyone, Angela and Ian, Men's Mental Health Awareness Month is in November, so we thought it would be a good time to start the conversation about men's mental health. We know that boys, are less likely to talk to somebody about suicide or about how they're feeling, just, their mental health in general. Yet men and boys are not immune to mental health conditions, right? So, PTSD, depression, anxiety, substance misuse, all kinds of things, it's part of the human condition. And so sometimes men and boys, they experience those sorts of things, but they do find them harder to talk about. We also know that men die by suicide much more often than women. Nearly 80% of suicide deaths in the United States are men and boys. And so I wanted to ask both of you, why do you think men and boys are less likely to talk about their mental health? Angela, I'll start with you.
Yeah, sure. I think there's a whole lot of contributing factors, and certainly no one answer is going to encapsulate everything,
Of course.
that contributes. I think a part of it is something that you'd be hard pressed to find someone in our society that isn't aware of, and that's that stigma, that masculine stigma that has existed in our society, in our world, really, that, boys don't cry. We're all very familiar with that tagline. You got to be strong, chin up, shoulders back, take it on the chest, keep going forward. Don't show weakness, don't be vulnerable, all of those things that a lot of us are really, really familiar with. And it's really unfortunate that, for hundreds and hundreds of years, that's what our young men and, young men as they're growing and grown men hear and feel really, really deeply rooted.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the major contributing factors. And I think also, the more work that I do in this field, the more I learn that let me back up, women are wired in general, this is a generalized statement, are wired to talk more openly about our emotions. It happens easier for us, whether or not that leans back on that stigma, for men to not open up or what have you. But I think that men in general have a really hard time opening up and getting deep in with their feelings and leaning on others with those feelings and those struggles and those challenges. So, as those things get bottled up further and further, it's like something with a cover, on it. It's eventually going to overflow. So I think there's a lot of contributing factors, and I think those two are at the top of my list.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Those are great points. What would you like to add?
I think Angela hit the nail on the head there. She touched on everything that masculinity, that culture of masculinity, since men are brought up to be strong boys that don't talk about their feelings, that don't cry, that hide some of those emotions. They don't have the skills to express those emotions. So as they get older and they're having to deal with struggles in life, anxieties, having that resiliency is always is a struggle. So, like Angela said, not being able to express your feelings appropriately, especially having that skill when they grow up.
Yeah, having that language,
Hmm.
sometimes boys aren't really even taught the language of emotion, right? And boys tend to have fewer friends, at least friends that will kind of go deep, like
Yeah.
you were talking about, right? So I think that's a factor as well. So even if they want to talk to somebody, who are they going to talk to?
Right.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, great. And you know what? Sometimes men might not recognize that something isn't right. That they're not feeling right, or that because, like you said, Angela, they're taught to just take it on the chest and keep going. right? Shake it off. And you do a lot of sports and you're involved in that. And what do you learn doing that?
Right, exactly. Get up, dust it off, deal with it. And
Yeah.
that's kind of how it's been preached to boys that you're tough, you don't show emotion, you don't show pain, um, and you just got to get through it.
Yeah.
And and again, it's part of the culture. And I think though that culture is changing.
Hmm.
As I've gotten more into suicide prevention and going into schools and stuff like that, seeing a lot of resources for boys that they can express their feelings, seeing a lot more athletes coming out saying, hey, mental health is a problem for men, is a problem out there. So really getting that message out there, it's coming. I think the culture is changing a little bit, uh, helping to dissolve some of that stigma. But we need more of it. So
Yeah. Being able to recognize that pain, name it, and then do something about it, right? Go see somebody. And men are doers, so I know it's a mission that they can take on. It's really taking care of themselves. So moving into thinking about suicide a little bit, I talked about almost 80% of our losses, suicide losses, are men and boys. So why do you think men and boys are dying by suicide more often than women and girls, Angela?
Yeah, I think a lot of it, again, I will preface it with saying, there's no generalized answer to that. There's no
Of
blanket
course.
statement, but goes back to, what I was saying about, think of a soda bottle with a cap on it. When I do a lot of public presentations in schools and for businesses and public and whatnot. And I talk about, you know, um, think of your mental health as a cup. Okay. And you've got things that are in there, that we're kind of born with, childhood trauma, all of these things that we don't really get much choice in. But then, and those are usually marshmallows in the bottom of the cup. And then I start adding different colored candies to it. And I say, then you have the stress that we face in our everyday life, financial concerns, work concerns, family, mental health struggles. All of those things start piling up and piling up and piling up. And when your candies start to get to the top and maybe start to spill over, that's when you're faced with some serious mental health challenges. And that's when things start to literally bottle up inside of us. So I think that in general, men aren't great. They haven't been taught and they haven't been fostered in our society to practice those self care practices, if you will, to help those candies from piling up in the cup and keep it from overflowing. It goes back to what we were just saying.
Right.
Don't show weakness, don't talk about it, don't cry. So they have spent very little, if any, as a society, any time really on those self-care tips. And like Ian said, we are getting better about it. I think that we're starting to move in a good direction. But I think that in general, men just keep it bottled up so much more until it just becomes too much. And of course, heaven forbid they become a burden on someone in their circle by talking about all of these things, all of these candies, if you will, that are spilling over their cup. And I think that just that is a direct factor to the statistics that you spoke about, Mary.
I love that analogy. Another part is how do they cope with all that stress? Often men resort to substances to dull the pain of what they're going through. Men are also gun ownership. Especially in the state of Maine, we're hunters out here, so access to those lethal means as well. Um, uh, so all of that bottled up, makes the risk much higher for suicide for men.
So another thing that we don't talk a lot about in society in terms of our men is connection. And I alluded to that before, but when you talked about burdensomeness, right, Angela, you were talking about men don't like to feel like a burden.
Hmm.
They want to have purpose. They want to have connection, drive, but that drive to support their families
Hmm.
and to take care of people in society in general, whatever, all that energy that they have. And then when they don't feel like they have purpose, or when they feel like they're doing more harm than good, or when they feel like they are a burden, that they have nothing left to give. Maybe older people are, they run into health problems and they're being taken care of by their partners. And they feel like, oh, this is too much work for them. They never wanted to be work for somebody else, or they're supposed to be,
Mhm.
the ones who are providing or who are taking care of. And so that's a really tough role for men to release,
Mm.
right? And they may not understand that they can provide and give in other ways.
Yeah.
And I think connection is a piece of that. So feeling like you're connected to other people, other men, other individuals, just to be able to say, "Hey, I'm not doing okay today. Hey, I could really use some help, and I'll help you when I'm feeling up to it, whatever." Um, Really making sure that those connections remain stable, because another risk factor in terms of suicide is isolation, right? And so if men are feeling isolated, if they are feeling like burdens, if they're pulling back, if they are getting into substance use or impulsivity, taking risks that maybe are, are not good for them, and so on, it can really um, put them at great risk for suicide. And like you were talking about, Ian, access to lethal means is something that is a conversation that we have to have a lot more, I think, with our men and with the people who love them, because it's not only on a person who is um, in crisis to stop themselves. It's about restricting those means, and about people coming together to support that person. To say, hey, let's take this away. Let's go talk. Let's do what we can do to take care of you today. Knowing that, doesn't mean that you're not going to ever be able to hunt again or anything like that. It's really just right now.
Yep. And when I part of when I do a lot of public speaking, that is one of the aspects that we talk about is what to say. We have a black and white card that says a resource card that is called our what to say and what to do card. And that is quite literally what to say and what to do if you fear that a loved one is in crisis. And one of the things on there is, taking firearms and medications out of the situation just for now. I'm not saying that things are going to stay like this for a long period of time or anything. Just for now, let's
Right.
just talk about doing it just for now, just until these rocks that are in the way, tend to subside a little bit.
Right.
And I think that, there's I could go down that rabbit hole with what to do in those moments for a very, very long time, much longer than we have in
Mm.
this podcast. But I agree that, putting that point across that we're not talking about forever. Like you said, Ian, living in Maine, we have very large population of adults and kids who enjoy our great outdoors. So it's not a forever thing. It's just for this moment, just for this time being, while we get everybody in a safe place.
Yeah.
Right. And we all know that, suicidal crises are often short-lived. So this is not something that's necessarily, again, going to last forever. But also, when it is happening, we want to make sure that there are as many things to slow somebody down from that, making that decision as possible. So, so thank you for that. So how do you think we can help men and boys get the support they need? I'll start with you.
Okay. Yeah. So having conversations just like we're having today, getting that word out that it's okay to be vulnerable for men. It's okay to cry. It's okay to, um, you know, not have all your ducks in a row. And having that conversation uh, when children are young, when boys are young, and starting at a young age, and not brushing it off, and not saying it's okay, don't cry, get up, you know and how do we talk about our emotions? How do we explain what we're feeling without feeling like we're a burden on somebody, or being able to share something that you think will make others feel differently about you? all those things that men are bottling up, that are keeping to themselves, teaching it at a young age. Also, just talking about it, getting it out in the public, getting athletes to share their mental health too. I think that that's helped me tremendously to know that they're going through the same struggles, because everything isn't just Instagram photos and looking great, right? And that affects men too,
Yeah.
as much as social media. You think that it doesn't, but men have, high standards of themselves, and they want to compete and win, and those are things that are preached at a young age as well. So how do you deal with when it comes to, well, things aren't going your way? Having that resiliency, and that's often things that we talk about in schools, being able to be resilient. So,
Positive messaging
mhm.
and positive role models who are willing to talk about mental health in a positive, healthy way is crucial.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially when there's a lot of negative messaging
Yeah.
out there.
Yes.
Yeah. So, what
Yeah.
do you think, Angela?
I completely agree with everything that Ian said, and especially that positive mentorship or role models, if you will. I think that's something that we are starting to do. Our society is starting to do on a really in a good way. We're really starting to move in a good way. Like you said, athletes and celebrities, and even people in the community being upfront and open and honest. And this goes for everyone, not just men, but in speaking about men's mental health, especially having those role models that a lot of young men look up to, um, speaking openly about their challenges, and also being open and creating and fostering these relationships. My husband is a co-founder, and serves on the board for Stay for Life, and he sets a great example by, he's this really burly looking, hairy looking guy, and the kind of guy that you'd love to just sit down and hang out with. And he'll tell you, I cry every day. I cry all the time. Emotions are big and stuff gets heavy. And and so creating and fostering those relationships, not just interpersonal, but community wide, and creating those safe spaces where men and everyone, and especially men, can feel safe, and can feel like it's really almost a norm, because it should be a norm
Yeah.
to be able to express those challenges. So I think modeling those behaviors and providing those safe environments where people can express those concerns, and just reminding each other constantly, constantly. One of the things I say is, especially with parents, we don't tell our kids not to text and drive once and think that okay, I said it and now they know and now I never have to say it again. No, we're telling them that over and over and over again. We need to be doing the same thing with mental health awareness and suicide prevention. And
Yeah.
those conversations are really hard to have, and they need to happen all the time. So, checking in with loved ones, creating those opportunities for really providing that slow down time for checking in with a friend, or a loved one about how are you feeling, and giving them that opportunity to, oh, here's my chance. Okay, maybe I will talk about it right now. Opening those doors for them.
Yeah, I agree 100%. It's really on us, especially if somebody is having a really tough time and we notice, to start the conversation, open that conversation and say, "How are you doing today?" And no, really, how are you doing? Beyond the just, not letting them just say, "Oh, fine," right? Like we tend to do.
Someone, and if you think that someone is struggling and you say, how are you doing, and they say, I'm fine, I'm good, everything's good, I said, and if you have a little niggling and in your gut that's telling you that they're not fine, make an awkward pause for them, silence for a second, look them dead in the eye, and say, how are you doing?
Mm.
Because chances are, if you give that pause, if you look them right in the eye, they're going to get that message that you're not saying this as a pleasantry. You're not just passing them in the hall and just making small talk. You are really checking in on them, and you're providing that space and that time and that slowed down, being present in that moment to ask them again, because more times than not, you're going to get the I'm fine answer.
Oh yeah. Yep, absolutely. And what a great tip, a great technique.
Mm.
Just we know that the conversation isn't necessarily going to be easy. but also it gets easier the more often you do it. Practice, right?
Yeah.
Thing is so important. And in another podcast with another guest from the Kita Center, Steve and I talked about that the importance of practice.
Mm.
This is not a skill that you just read off a card and say, okay, I'm good. And because it's still gonna feel awkward. I mean, I've been in mental health for 25 plus years, and it's still not always easy to start
Mm.
the conversation, especially when you know that the other person might be uncomfortable.
Right.
So the more that we can just take the first step and say, "Hey, how are you doing? How are you doing really?" Right? And really being sincere in that, I think is super important. We can also encourage healthier coping skills
Yes.
in our boys, right?
Yeah.
What are some examples that you can think of?
Well, and Angela touched on this early in this
Yeah.
conversation, but self-care,
Mhm.
being able to, do the things that you enjoy, not just always pushing forward and pushing forward and pushing forward and ignoring yourself. And, and that's part of having also good coping skills.
Mhm.
Coping skills include that self-care.
Yeah.
For me, it's doing things with my family and doing activities, playing sports. Uh, that's what I really love to do, and that helps me so much. I can't do without it.
Yeah.
So encouraging men to take a part of their day or part of their weekend to slice out and say, "Hey, go out and enjoy yourself and just be with friends, be with others. Be able to just have that time for yourself." So yeah,
And playing just for the fun of it,
yeah,
not necessarily to compete to be
right,
the best,
right.
right? I think just in our society, I think for everybody, men
Hmm.
and women, we kind of think, oh, we have to be good at something in order to make it valuable. And that's not the case at all. So
Yeah.
I think we should be uncomfortable and stumbling and all of that because we're having fun doing it,
Right.
and that's the real point there. Do you have other kind of self-care tips or things that you can think of, Angela?
Yeah, one of the things that I like to talk to people about and is journaling. And usually, as soon as I say that word, I see people go, okay, sure,
They roll.
whatever, whatever. I myself have journaled for almost as long as I can remember. I remember being a teenager and writing. However, that doesn't set the precedence for what journaling can or doesn't have to be. Some people when they think of journaling, they think of writing down all of my feelings and going through everything and putting it all thorough, and it doesn't have to be anything like that. It can be words scribbled on a page, it can be drawings, it can be colors, it can be shading on the anything that gets what's up here onto a piece of paper and just out of your mind. It's scientifically proven that things like that are helpful in alleviating some of that stress and pressure that we feel. So, journaling is one that I talk about often, and it certainly can be writing novels if that's what starts to happen once you get writing. I found a really, really cool journal. It's called the Worry for Nothing journal, and I found it online. And I have nothing to do, I have zero affiliation with it. I just really, really liked it and put it through our advisory board, and they like it too. And it uses really blank and rather really simple and straightforward prompts like, okay, what's stressing you out today? And what happened? And how did you react? And how did that make you feel? It's not fluffy, it's not deep diving into a lot of stuff. It's really just straightforward and asking you to look at the situation from the outside and how did you respond, and maybe how could you respond in the future. So things like that I think are to introduce people to these other ideas of self-care, and reminding them that those things are super super helpful is a big part of helping with those coping strategies.
Yeah. I think of other, coping strategies for self care. Getting enough sleep
Mm.
and eating well and exercising, all that good stuff that we all think about, right? But I think about running. I was going to say, oh, meditation is something that can
Mm.
be really helpful too. And running, I've heard, is very meditative
Mhm.
when you get in the zone, right?
Mhm.
I don't know myself, but just that hobbies and creativity.
Mm.
and all of that. And I think that, journaling, giving people options
Mm.
because, no two men are the same.
Mhm.
No two boys are the same. We shouldn't expect that. We don't want
Mhm.
to just, again, that's stigmatizing. We don't just want to put, one big label and one big layer of here, you should do this,
Mm.
go do the sports thing,
Mm.
or go do whatever.
Yeah.
And that might not be their thing.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to just have that conversation. What do you like?
Mm.
What sparks you? What makes you feel alive? What
Yeah,
brings
I
you
think
joy?
it's to mention the passive supports that are out there for self-care too. I myself have struggled with, I was diagnosed with depression early on in adulthood, and sometimes when you're down in those depths, you just don't have it in you to go out and play around a basketball or go for a run or whatnot. So the passive tips, like using a weighted blanket, like one of the really cool ones that I've read about is rearranging your surroundings. So quite literally changing where things sit in your room or your house. A playlist. I'll be the first one to say that my taste in music is probably not the what most people listen to, but yet I have a playlist on my music list that says I'm happy,
Mm.
and it might sound corny, but it's those uplifting songs, it's the upbeat music, be it what it may be. But it's a passive way to provide self-care. It doesn't take a lot of effort. It's something that's relatively easy to do when you can be in those deep dark holes when you can't see the way out. Then simply putting a weighted blanket over your body while you're laying in bed sometimes can be a helpful tip, a helpful support.
Absolutely. I come back to thinking about the connection that men need, especially when they are going through it, and so how can we help? We can sit there and listen, to them if they want to talk. We can put that weighted blanket over them, and just layer it on there, or, bring them some water. We can give them some space if they want it, or just sit next to them on the couch and watch TV. We can do any of those sorts of things and more, whatever folks kind of feel like they need. But I think it's important for those who are going to help to make sure that when they put that offer out there, they're ready to follow up with the help, right? Because if a person, a man in particular, is ready to put it out there for you, it's not going to be much good if you don't catch the ball,
Mm.
right? I mean, you've got to be able to say, okay, I'm here for you, I help you. I want to transition and talk about Stay for Life a little bit, Angela. So, as we mentioned before, you're all dedicated to saving lives by advocating for men's mental health and suicide prevention. So, can you tell us a little more about why you started Stay for Life and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for asking. So, we are a 501(c)(3) nonprofit organization, and we are based here in Maine. We actually have where our kind of headquarters, if you will, is this room right here. We're in southern Maine, but we do have two of our co founders in northern Maine too. So, we do operate throughout the state and into New Hampshire as well. Um, and we are just coming up on being 3 years old as an organization. We were founded in the fall of 2022. And yeah, our mission is saving lives, and we're advocating for men's mental health and suicide prevention. But our mission work goes way beyond that of men's mental health, where we do things where we collaborate with schools, businesses, public organizations, everybody. We want everyone to have healthy mental health, and everyone to know those suicide prevention tips. But we have a special focus on men because of all those numbers that you were speaking of earlier today in this session. Um, I lost my 18-year-old son, Trent Gibson, to suicide when he was 18 years old. I lost him in May, or we lost him in May of, I'm sorry, June of 22. May is his birthday. Um, we lost him on Father's Day. I had no idea that this was coming. I didn't have uh, any outward signs. Of course, hindsight is 22. And now that I know what I know, I can look back and I say, oh, there we go. Oh, okay, there it is. Um, but it was not something that we were expecting. So after losing Trent, He had just graduated high school here in Wells, and one of the first thoughts that I had was, oh my gosh, his friends and his classmates. How are they going to catch this ball that has been thrown at them now? So I wanted to have magnets made for all of them to take away to whether they were going away to college now or starting a career path or even staying at home there. I wanted them to have a red magnet with the crisis hotline number on it in case anybody else felt like they were in that deep, dark place and needed some support to get through. So at that point in time, Stay for Life wasn't a thought. All I wanted to do was get some kind of support to these guys and girls who had just lost their friend. So we created those magnets. The help of myself and my husband and my best friend created these magnets and got them in the hands of all of his classmates. And the feedback that we got from his classmates and the families therein was overwhelming. And so the more we got talking about it and the more I got thinking about it, and people were talking about men, men and Trent in general, we thought, wow, this is our world is really lacking this focus on men's mental health. And so I approached my best friend and my sister-in-law and said, what do you think about us making a go of this and seeing where we can take some resources for men's mental health and gathering and making a hub and doing some advocacy work? And they were all 100% in. So we've been doing a lot in the past 3 years since our inception. None of us have any experience in the nonprofit world. So, and I think that sometimes that's a good thing because we're building this bicycle as we're riding it. But
Sure.
now we have several projects, and like I said, I do a lot of public speaking and with schools and businesses and public organizations, and just talking with really anybody and everybody that will listen about mental health and suicide prevention.
Wonderful. Thank you. I'm so sorry for your loss of Trent.
Thank you.
You're helping him, just keep his memory alive in just such a beautiful way.
Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely. So, are there special events or programs or things that you do in Stay for Life that you want to highlight?
Yeah, absolutely. So summer is typically our busy event time. So we're just winding down from that, but we do have some projects that really are really really helpful in our communities here in Southern Maine and throughout. So one of them is Trent's Tree, and that's a holiday initiative, and that's going to be starting up. It has behind the scenes, it has already started, but
Yeah.
it will be hitting communities in the month of December. And Trent's Tree is an interactive holiday project for people who are grieving Trent, quite frankly,
Mm-hmm.
who are grieving anyone that they've lost to suicide, who support someone who struggles with mental health or themselves who may struggle with mental health, or someone who really just has a difficult time facing the holiday season, because as we all know, there's a lot that comes along with that.
Right.
So this will be our third year having public displays, and we have gone from one tree in our front yard to last year we had 16 trees throughout the state of Maine. And last year, I believe we received over 30 requests. So Trent's trees can be found in a community near you. People are invited to hang ornaments for any one of those reasons that I just listed, and it's a really really moving project, and especially on college campuses, we've found them to be really, really helpful and useful. One of our other big projects that we pair with the Kita Center, you had mentioned working with the Kita Center, is
Yes.
our comfort boxes. And that's a collaborative project in which we send boxes of suicide loss survivor support to families who have lost a loved one to suicide. So it just kind of walks beside them on that journey of that nobody wants to be on. Nobody wants to talk about that. Nobody wants to be on that journey. And yet we're here trying to help them, saying, we're here and we see you. And here are some things that might or might not be helpful for you, but we're gonna give them to you and hope that it helps you on this path. Um, and then we have developed and orchestrate Stay man-to-man peer support group. So we started off with one location here in Wells, and we now have two locations. And those group meetings are peer facilitated. So it's not professionally led, which and it's certainly not a stand-in for professional support, because that certainly has its place. But these peer groups are just a little bit more informal. We have specially trained peer facilitators that lead these groups, and it's quite frankly a group of men ages 18 and up that meet each week. It's free, it's judgment free, it's confidential. You get a snack and a water and a soda if you want,
Can't
and you
beat
just
it.
sit around and yeah, and talk about what's on their mind, and it can be things that are maybe a little bit more minor, all the way through the spectrum to we've had people showing up who are currently experiencing suicidal ideation. So just a really informal and laid back way for guys to have an outlet for those things, like we were saying before, creating these communities and fostering these connections in which guys can unload a little bit of their pressure and their stress.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing about Stay for Life. Stayforlife.org is your website that people can go to. If people are experiencing a crisis, they can call, text, or chat with 988. That's another good resource. And if men are looking for a little more info about mental health in a way that's um, interactive and interesting and fun, we have something on our website called Man Therapy, and that is tailored specifically for men. And so it's namimaine.org/man therapy. Um, we also have suicide prevention and after a loss resources on our website, and our helpline that is not a crisis line, but it is a way to get information, referrals, and just lots of resources for lots of things. So Angela, I want to thank you for being here, and Ian, thank you for being here on the podcast today to start the conversation on men's mental health. We hope you'll continue it as you go about your days with the men in your lives and the women in your lives too. If you need mental health support immediately, please do dial 988. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked what you saw, don't forget to subscribe and share the video with friends. We'll see you next time on NAMI Talks.